Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video. Getting ready to go through these parts with you. First things first, I want to show off this clutch cover again. It came on this bike and I've still not been able to find anything as to what it is or where it came from, so I'm starting to lean towards it possibly being homemade, but I'm going to ask you guys, so leave a comment down below. Let me know if you think this thing's homemade, or if you think you've got an idea of where you might have seen one before. Also, leave a comment down below. Help me out. And if you're familiar with the series, go ahead and skip ahead. We'll start talking about these parts. But here's a short little recap on how we got to where we are. If you're not, hop over to the channel. There's some other videos up on this bike. But here we are. Let's get into it. All right. First things first. Let's pop this head off. Looks like we got 12 millimeters on there. We got some tools already strung out. What I thought I might need. Alright guys, we got the Cr250 completely torn down as far as we need to go so we can make a complete part list, see everything we need to see, and kind of get a good idea of what it's going to take to get this thing going back together. So stick around, I'll show you some of this stuff, some good, some bad. Found a couple surprises here and there, but we'll dive into it right now. Alright, so the first thing I want to show you guys, I've already showed you guys, the clutch cover. As cool as it is, it's also a big problem because they had to do all kinds of stuff to make that thing work between it and the foot pegs that were on the bike. I don't even know if it's worth trying to reuse at this point. But also, what the clutch cover was hiding was a basket with a broken pedal on it. There's also a little bit of grooving starting in this basket, so definitely going to have to replace the basket, and possibly going to have to replace that really cool clutch cover. But it wasn't all bad. This is the rest of the clutch components, and I'm just showing this because this is also a really good idea. If you're taking something apart, throw it all in a bag, that way you know where everything's at when you go to put it back together. Also the kickstart, I got lucky. I've had this one. They're not the exact same bend, but I'm not gonna order one until the motor's back in the bike and we can try this one, because this one's really tight still. It's really tight, snaps back into place. It's a lot tighter than that one, so we may not have to buy one, but we'll still have to replace the one that came on the bike. Also, the pivot bolt, if you guys, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but the threads on this pivot bolt are really flat. I was surprised we were able to get that out of the bike in the first place, because if you'll look, there's absolutely no, I mean, it's pretty dry as far as pivot bolts go. These are supposed to be heavily greased. I'm gonna say someone's already been in there and replaced the swing arm bearings, because they actually looked really nice, but they didn't replace the bolt, and because of that there might have been some cross threading. This may not be the original swing arm bolt, So we're going to replace that and go back to OEM. On the good side of things, no, it doesn't look very good, but this is an aluminum case. Everything looks to be factory. There's your factory marks. It's not a replacement. It's a factory aluminum side cover, so we won't have any of the magnesium rod issues with it. Looks to be pretty clean other than the paint job on it and whatever all this tarnishing is in here. We'll get that cleaned up and be able to reuse it, no problems at all. And then I don't know how well I'll be able to show you guys, but the cylinder on this bike was actually really nice. I was really impressed. Other than that oil smudge I just put in there. There's those lines going there, and I found out why on the piston, but the Nicocil looks great. The power valves were working. I mean, they're still synced up. Everything's looking great. Looks like they were actually serviced, because this, you can see how those two top cats are different colored. This is a factory bushing, and I'm not so sure this hasn't been replaced or aftermarket. So, but oh no, it's still got the orange on it. It's just got some sort of gray on top of it. There it goes. Okay, so it looks very factory. But everything in there seems to be working really smooth. The bore of the cylinder looks awesome. So not going to have to do any kind of cylinder work. We're still going to put this on a bore gauge and measure it out so we're getting the right size piston. Which brings me to the piston. This is what we pulled out of it here. It's a forged Wiseco that's drilled on the exhaust side, and they do that for better lubrication and also heat dissipation on the exhaust side because it gets hot. But there's lines, I'm sorry with the focus, there's lines on this intake side of the piston, which is odd. There's almost always, on the bikes that I buy anyway, there's almost always, these lines are always on this side. The exhaust is where you usually have problems, especially with exhaust valve bikes. And the older two-strokes are almost all exhaust valve bikes until you get pretty old, pretty vintage stuff. But all the vertical marks are on the intake side, which is really odd. Which could be because whenever we took this motor down, it's got a hot rods crank in it. So we'll have to pay really close attention to that whenever it goes back together. Here's the rear brake assembly. Still not sure what this came off of, but that is definitely not off of a Cr250. I'm sure this brake pedal once was, but it's missing about half of it there in the middle, so we'll be looking for a new brake pedal and really a complete rear brake assembly. So everything really, I mean, other than some pleasant surprises about the cylinder being in a really nice shape, the only thing that really was kind of a heartbreaker for me was the rear shock. And I had anticipated painting this and getting it, or powder coating it back to yellow, back to factory. And then if you look really close on that rod, that's a big spot of rust. And what that means is that is never going to seal properly, or it's going to tear the seals up as it slides up and down over that rod. Right in there is really hard to put. I mean, you can sand it down and polish it and maybe get by, But if there's any amount of pitting on that at all, the pitting is going to win in the long run, and you're going to end up rebuilding your shock way more often than you want to or need to. So we I looked at this. This is a 88 off of a 1988, but I don't think it's going to work. The foot at the bottom, or the clevis as you'd call it, at the bottom of it is built a little differently on the older one, and the external reservoir is a little different also, and I don't know if it would fit. So we'll be having to source a new rear shock. But other than that, the motor other than the outside being completely filthy, the motor looked really clean. It looks really clean on the inside. All in all, we'll just be tracking down some miscellaneous parts and pieces here and there and cleaning stuff up the best we can. Also, the big kicker for this bike was the carburetor. It's probably one of the worst I've ever gotten a hold of. In fact, the slide as of right now is not moving at all. I pulled the bowl off to look, and there you go. There's a little better idea of just how bad that carburetor was. I've got my guesses as to what was living in it and to what all that is, but I'll just say I've been using gloves around this carburetor so far, and that slide is stuck. I haven't been able to get it to move at all. But other than the pile of gunk there in the bowl, everything else looked to be acceptable. Does still have that diffuser there. Those are discontinued, and most of the time they're missing. You can see that stuff just seeping out of the jets, the old gas or whatever it is. So this thing's in need of a somewhat of an overhaul. But all in all, everything seems pretty doable. So it's back in the tote, the swing arms there. Got some rusted Phillips head screws in there we'll have to deal with. But like I said, the bearings actually looked pretty decent for what they are. There's a 19-inch rear wheel on the back of this bike, which I don't know if it's supposed to be or not, so I'll look into that. Doesn't really bother me. The 88 behind it has or the 89 behind it has an 18-inch rear wheel, and I don't know when Honda switched their 250s to 19s factory. I will say that this rear wheel has an aluminum hub, or at least a painted. It's not black like the magnesium ones on the 89 or like the front wheel on this 91, so that's why I'm suspicious. The races in the neck of that frame for the races felt really smooth, and the bearings actually look really new on the front of the. There was fresh red grease on upper and lower bearings on the steering stem. So all in all, it's full of little surprises. It's gonna need a little bit more love, a few more parts, but all in all, now we know what we need, or at least the start of it, so we'll get going on that. Alright guys, so that's kind of a rundown on what we're up against on the 1991 Cr250. If you like these kind of videos, make sure to give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want. Make sure to go back and at least check it out. There's a couple more videos on this 91 and a couple other bikes also. But until we get some parts rolling up for the 91, it's time to work on other stuff. So we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot.